We're going to get a chance now to celebrate in the city's success, Washington, D.C. success in delivering those 36,000 housing units at a really difficult economic time in our country. And to lead us in that discussion, we're going to invite up to the stage Nina Albert, who's the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development for Washington, D.C., to lead us in a discussion on how they pull this off. How did they get here?
Well, I get to welcome you again to Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for being here. I'm joined by the real experts and the folks who've been leading this effort on behalf of Mayor Bowser for more than the past 5 years. So on stage with me is Anita Cozart, who's our Director of the Office of Planning, and Colleen Green, who's our Director of Housing and Community Development. So I'll just start with just a couple points. And we have a little bit of a presentation. Hopefully you'll stick with us. But just about D.C. and a little bit about the landscape of D.C., because I think that context, as we heard from the last panel, matters so much as to what you're tackling and managing as a city. So D.C. is about 700,000 people, and we're really excited about the fact that we continue to grow. And as the mayor said in her opening remarks today, we have surpassed our pre-COVID population goals. I'm one of the fastest growing cities. So completely excited about that. We have other fantastic growth trends, which is we continue to be a diversifying city. We have high growth industries such as tech that continue to diversify our economy. We also are one of the most educated cities in the country. So all positive in terms of macro trends. But the things that we continue as a local government to focus on is the increasing sort of barbell effect of our population, where we have a significant missing middle, and the inadequate housing supply that can address all rungs of the income ladder. Some highlights that I think are important to note are just the proportion and mix of rental and home ownership. So we're predominantly rental, 60% of our marketplace. Also, just the median rent rate is pretty high, $2,500 a month. And so, you know, as many people have mentioned before, what kind of income do you need to generate to be able to sustain and pay for that? And then even our home price is high, $650,000 medium home price. Of course, many above that, some below. And then last but not least, for a city that historically has called itself Chocolate City, that has been a majority-minority city for most of its existence, we look at what are the racial and economic equities and or disparities in the city. And you can see here that in terms of median household income, white families are earning 2.5 times what black families are on average, as well as 21% of our black residents continuing to live in poverty. And so these are not unusual or necessarily off-trend dynamics, but more importantly, it's not acceptable. So let's go to the next slide. So we've talked this morning about that 36,000 goal and how we achieved it. And I always say leadership matters. You know, and having a mayor who not only came from a housing background, but also who has made this the pillar of her tenure matters. And so not only was there a numeric hard goal that had that did not change. I've heard different comments today about, you know, that goal post changing. For the District of Columbia and under Mayor Bowser's leadership, that did not change. 36,000, and there was a mayor's order that was issued to all the agencies with clear roles and responsibilities, so that accountability factor was included, as well as the freedom to innovate and seek new tools to achieve, to get to that goal. I'll also say that we have not talked about the provider marketplace very much this morning. And the communication to our developers is also something that I think is a lesson learned. And I'll just note that we have a focus on minority-owned businesses growing. We actually have a target for the percentage of minority-owned businesses that we want in this city. And with this goal, a company to focus through DHCD's RFPs, through the deputy mayor's office's RFPs for development, goals and preferences for minority-owned developers. And I am incredibly excited to say and share that across the United States, only 0.5% of developers are owned by people of color. 0.5% in the commercial marketplace. In Washington, D.C., it's 17%. So we outpace dramatically and have representation not only in the housing, the people that we're trying to house, but also in the business community that's trying to house them. And then we really dedicated ourselves to accountability and transparency. And so Anita and Colleen will talk about how we did that and how we actually implemented that. So next slide. Just kind of wanted to share some of the highlights, but we'll go into more lessons learned as we kind of tackle the conversation. There was that 36,000 goal. We haven't talked enough about embedded within that goal was achieving 12,000 new affordable housing units as well. So very focused on new production. Colleen could lead a conversation about that balance of production and preservation. But that production target has really led us to a pretty remarkable outcome that we can now prove or show how new production in housing has stemmed or slowed rent appreciation. And so in the last column, what we're able to demonstrate is that since 2018, when this goal was set, we have actually had almost flat rent appreciation because we've been able to keep up with the supply, delivering new supply. And that's compared to the rest of the U.S. market. And then last but not least, this is always about the people and how many people we're able to serve. And so when this goal was set out back in, when we take a look at the numbers, 2015, less than 10% of our population was housed in affordable housing. And today, that number has increased to 14%. So incredibly meaningful achievements that are more than just the production of housing. We're seeing that trickle-down effect to how that housing goal has impacted all parts of the marketplace. And I know that we talk a lot about housing as a social mandate, which it is. In a city that's a high-cost city and also a growing city, tackling housing and making sure that as a city, we compete with all other cities. And so right now, post-COVID, where somebody can have a job anywhere, we are competing with less expensive cities. And so it is our economic competitive requirement to bring the cost of housing down for all rungs of the income ladder, obviously not losing focus on our need to continue to make sure that we have equitable housing solutions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anita to take us through how we did it, and then to Colleen to talk about the new tools and sort of management of the affordable housing marketplace.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm really excited to be here to tell a piece of our story. So one of the things that we did in setting forth these goals is really engage residents. Over 24 community meetings, engaging thousands of residents to identify what were some of the challenges that they saw around attainable and affordable housing. And one of the things that we saw was when we think about the entire city, that there's not an equal distribution of affordable homes across the city. We saw that from maps. I'm an urban planner, so you know I love maps. But we also heard that from the residents and expressed that. So in D.C., rooting you here, at the time that we set our goals, we saw that the disparities of those affordable homes were significant. So you have in one part of the city, part of our most affluent part of the city, under 500 affordable homes. And in one of our lowest wealth parts of the city, 15,000 affordable homes. That was something that was pinpointed by residents, and so that led us into addition to our 36K goal by 2025 with 12,000 affordable units, making sure that we set neighborhood level affordable housing goals that would steer us in a better direction where there was a fairer and more equal distribution of homes across the city. And so that's what really is a guidepost for us. And one of the goals that we have set out for 2050 is by 2050 across the city, 15% affordable homes, regardless of where you live, so that every part of our city is a neighborhood of opportunity, a neighborhood of choice, and that kind of thing. And that was something that we codified in our 2021 comprehensive plan, the guide for land use and development in the city. And so that's what's represented here in the maps that are here.
Before you move on, and this was for the mayor of Cambridge and many cities that are facing NIMBY pressures. Personally, as I saw this sub-sector or sub-area goals, and I grew up in one of the more affluent parts of the city where that conversation of introducing more mixed income housing is a complicated one. I actually think that the conversation has changed because of this transparency in the inequity of distribution of housing. And so this is the first in the nation, I believe, where we have set subsector or sub-area goals. And I think it has had a great impact on being able to change the conversation, particularly in neighborhoods that are particularly prone to strong NIMBYism.
Agree with you. And in many ways, advocacy groups and others use this data and information to really make the case, whether they had to make the case to Councilmember Bonds and her colleagues. They certainly didn't have to make the case to the mayor, but making the case with their other local elected representatives about how important it was to make these investments. And this was a change. This required a change in, and on the next slide, you'll see some of the tools that we had. We thought it was really important to bring together land use, zoning tools, along with financing tools and incentives, and align them better. That was a big part of what the mayor's order caused us to do as agencies. Colleen and I are here, but we're representing several others who are in the audience who have agency over our housing initiatives. And together, we really thought about how do we shift, how do we get ourselves closer to that 15% affordable distribution? How do we make sure that we're aligning, if we're trying to create opportunities for more capacity, for more housing along our transit corridors? How do we line that up with the financing and make that all easier for whether it's a nonprofit developer or a for-profit developer to move through our processes of coupling both the permitting, coupling the zoning, and the financing all together? It just required us to sync up more. And in addition to being proud about achieving the 36,000 units, it also just creates more seamlessness amongst our agencies and working together. And so we actually we had some tools in place, and we amped them up. And we also created some new tools as well. So the amped up tools, you heard the mayor talk about the $1.4 billion for Housing Production Trust Fund. That was key and crucial. And we steered a lot of those resources and made sure that they were going to the goals that we had at those sub-area levels. We also had inclusionary zoning requirements, but we amped those up as well to make sure that we would have more of those affordable homes available. We looked at how we could increase housing capacity in downtown and along our waterfront. We also already had in place reduced housing requirements and all of the other capacity that I talked about. That really yields, it's not just something on paper. We think that contributed really moving up our production by 34%, kind of on an annual basis. So it was the coupling of these tools, it was the tweaking of some of the tools, and adding new tools in place as well. Some of those new tools, some targeted tax abatements, really necessary in places where the cost of land is just so much higher in some parts of our city. And then another piece that we really looked at was how we leveraged our publicly owned land. That contributed 4,400 of the units, 4,400 of the homes, and provided affordability for us. In addition, we leveraged our federal assets. So on the next slide, I want to talk about one particular project that did this. And we were really proud to be able to redevelop a former military campus into a complete neighborhood, featuring 2,300 units, a portion of which were affordable, but also really important are the neighborhood-serving uses that are there on that site. And I know it's near and dear to the mayor's heart, given that she represented that council ward where this project is. And this project is in the northern part of our city, and it's an example of us bringing that greater and more fair distribution of units across the city. Also, we know that many of our federal assets are located downtown, and we're excited about opportunities to redevelop those and bring more housing to downtown. And also that offers us an opportunity to avoid displacement that might be felt in other parts of the city. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Director Green to share a bit more about our story.
Sure. On the next slide, we are presenting the Westerly as a case study that exemplifies all the district's integrated tools: public land, financial subsidies, zoning entitlements, and around transit-oriented development in Southwest waterfront area. It's a mixed-income community. It's located a block from the waterfront metro station, and it combines 136 affordable units of market-rate housing, which is included in an amenity-rich neighborhood, and half of those affordable units are targeted at 30% AMI and 50% AMI. This development was built on a former U.S. EPA office site and underscores the really critical role of federal land partnership. It also showcases how layering our tools can achieve ambitious goals, such as our 4% and 9% and DC low-income housing tax credits. Beyond housing, the Westerly has a vibrant community hub hosting a public charter school, a black box theater, and other local businesses. It demonstrates how housing development can anchor broader neighborhood revitalization. Next slide. The qualified allocation plan and our consolidated RFP requirements reflect our strategies and priorities, so as well as other funding mechanisms. They are tools to advance our equity and inclusion, and by prioritizing our values, such as permanent supportive housing, targeted housing opportunity areas and neighborhoods, as well as integrating innovation and sustainability, we are ensuring that every dollar aligns with the values of the district and the mayor. We also utilize requests for proposals through our property acquisition and disposition divisions with DHED to promote home ownership and development opportunities, aiming to create opportunities under underutilized properties. Well, the data tells an interesting story. Pre-2019, projects in low-cost areas have helped us in exceeding our goals by 200%. However, high-cost areas lag behind at only 35% of their targets due to scarcity and high development costs. Publicly owned land has been a game changer in neighborhoods like Central Washington and Anacostia. We're learning that strategic land use is as critical as financial incentives. Our next challenge in addressing barriers in high-cost areas is where creative solutions such as tax abatements and zoning changes are really essential. So some of our key successes. We have surpassed our housing targets, building more than 42,000 units, including over 12,250 affordable homes, and preserving 4,500 units. This has significantly slowed rent growth, demonstrating the power of supply to stabilize demand. In Rock Creek West, we've achieved a breakthrough with the first affordable housing project selected for financing, a testament to the importance of targeted incentives and persistence in high-cost areas. 20,000 units of new capacity will come with increased requirements for inclusionary zoning affordability, which will amount to about 4,000 affordable units. So no small plans. Ambitious goals like building 36,000 new units drive transformative action. Strategic interventions like tax abatements and zoning adjustments can unlock potential in high-cost areas where opportunities are limited. Preservation remains key to maintaining and redeveloping existing housing stock, often at a lower cost than new construction. Pre-development funding is also critical to ensuring projects remain viable. Ornamenta Newsom and revolving loan funds like SAFI and the Preservation Fund that provide short-term bridge financing to help projects achieve long-term affordability and stabilization. Also, integrating all the tools that we have, leveraging available tools is essential in high-cost cities. Creating innovative combinations of these resources will be important to achieve our continued desired outcomes. Lessons learned include improved regulatory environment, flexible, modern frameworks that enable housing growth, while rigid policies may hinder progress. Partnerships are also important as we receive input from our shared housing goals. So, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so what comes next? We have a couple things that are underway right now, which is planning and launching our 2050 comprehensive plan. And in that, I believe the number that you shared with me not that long ago is that by 2050, the district's population could increase to 845,000. So housing is such a dramatic part of being able to house that population and capture our strategies and put into place the land use and other policy priorities. So that is going on right now. We're also working very closely with the Urban Institute, and I just want to thank them for the partnership that they have with us in setting our next 5-year goals for housing development. And so we're doing that work now, and I hope, Mayor, to have that to you in this quarter, so that if it's 36,000 or whatever the new number is and whatever the new target is, that we'll be able to have, again, a renewed commitment, because 36,000, as we know, is not enough. Then last but not least is taking a look at developing, using the Urban Institute's information and data and sort of direction, developing a comprehensive housing strategy where we set new goals for equitable growth, where we stabilize and have plans to stabilize our existing affordable housing investments, where we are supporting black home ownership, and we have a specific target and goal of having 20,000 households by 2030. And then lastly, coordinating with partners on innovative financing tools and cost containment strategies. And I'm going to go take a look at the playbook that HUD Secretary Todman referenced this morning, because we don't need to reinvent the playbook. We need to lean into the solutions that the experts and other experts, because we have several experts here at the table, have identified. I will say this afternoon you're going to hear about the district's housing in downtown agenda and how we've thought about it. And as many large cities with concentrated commercial business districts are experiencing right now, there's a shift need in the volume of office, and having to think about how to convert or reposition highly concentrated office corridors to include more housing, because we're seeing in DC how resilient our neighborhoods that have a better mix of housing, residential, retail are doing. And so that's been one of our challenges. But as you think about what the opportunity is, and I'll give you a little preview for this afternoon, we set a goal of 15,000 new units in downtown. And right now, that growth and the ability of our downtown to absorb more housing or produce more housing is not in competition with existing neighborhoods. So it's almost an opportunity to deliver more new housing without upsetting the balance of single-family neighborhoods. And so you'll hear more about that and the analysis that we did and some of the opportunities that we see with that. And fortunately, for most cities, you know, the push for density in the downtown is not as complex a public conversation as within, you know, your single-family neighborhoods. And we're looking at the comp plan as sort of resetting what that mix of uses could be and maxing out density. So anyway, lots of tools, but I just didn't want to forget that unique opportunity that so many cities face today, which is, you know, what to do with downtowns. When you marry it and pair it with your housing goals, you know, it becomes a very interesting opportunity and prospect. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you to the city. Thank you to Mayor Bowser and your team for sharing in so much detail, you know, what's possible with enough support. And I think one of my key takeaways from these morning sessions has been that funding certainty for local governments for housing is a key difference maker in terms of addressing the NIMBY dynamic that might be happening in communities. Before we go to lunch, I would like to introduce and bring up to the podium NLC's president this year, Mayor Steve Patterson of Athens, Ohio, to share a little bit about what's next for NLC, the Housing Supply Accelerator, and anyone and everyone who wants to partner with us.
Thanks, Mike. I mentioned this earlier today, and that is that this past year, NLC celebrated the 100-year anniversary of NLC, and during that time, I can't remember who dreamt this up, but it was brilliant, to have the Centennial Roadshow. We got out and visited with over 130 cities, towns, and villages in different formats. And during that time, we engaged with a lot of mayors, city council members, city managers, village administrators, and chatted with them about, you know, concerns that they had. And the chief concern that kept coming up over and over again wasn't so much geography or population or income. What was consistent was the need for increasing their housing stock in their communities. As a mayor, I can tell you firsthand, I know that local communities, we didn't cause the collective problem of housing crisis, but we are ready to create the necessary partnerships to solve the issue for our own residents. For 2 years, NLC has been building partnerships with the private sector to encourage chief housing supply decision makers to work with local leaders and overcome the housing issues particular to our communities. The Housing Accelerator, Housing Supply Accelerator, is the result of that work to help communities create partnerships and solutions. With Mayor Muriel Bowser's leadership, the city of Washington, D.C. achieved its goal of 36,000, as you've heard, new housing units ahead of schedule by building partnerships. Today, I'm proud to introduce two local leaders who are deep into the local housing supply championship champions. They are champions. Mayor Muriel Bowser and Mayor Mark Shepard of Clearfield, Utah, as partners, check this out, as partners and co-chairs of America's Housing Comeback Advisory Group. So please join me in welcoming Mayor Bowser and Mayor Shepard to tell us more about the next steps of the Housing Supply Accelerator, America's Housing Comeback.
Well, thanks for that introduction, and welcome aboard, my partner here, in making sure that all of the things that we learned today with the help of our team at NLC, we can put into action for America's cities and towns. So as you've heard about America's Housing Comeback Advisory Committee, we are proud to chair. We want to take lessons learned. We want to provide recommendations that we gather with the NLC's help. Task force members will represent the diverse set of stakeholders that help us do our work in our local jurisdictions, where we will work together to create sustainable housing ecosystems. You'll hear that word a lot from me. We want to be strategic and focus on financing and real estate and all the things that we need to produce and preserve more affordable housing. And as Mayor Nuremberg said earlier, to make sure that our people can afford good quality housing. We aim to develop a cohesive strategy for working with the incoming administration, the next Congress, and our private sector partners to address our most urgent needs. So stay tuned, roll up your sleeves, work with us so that the recommendations that we develop, along with all of the other products that we've heard about today, including the Secretary's playbook, aren't on shelves. But they're in committee hearings at Congress, they're in budgets, they're with us every step of the way as we roll out these plans for our communities. Nina showed, the 3 outcomes that we're very proud of. We produced this housing and it had an impact on the rate of increase of rents, such that rent increases in the district were so much below the national average. We're also very proud that because of the interventions we've made, we have a greater percentage of our people living in affordable housing than were living in affordable housing 10 years ago. So while the problem is big, we know that taking it on every step of the way, bite by bite, we can create more affordable housing in the district, and more people will be able to afford to live there.
I'll keep it brief. We saw what can happen when we get a group of people together and create a housing supply accelerator and a playbook that came out of that to truly give cities a guide as to what can happen. I am excited for this opportunity to see us now put into action that playbook, to enhance that with our partners and say, how do we start building now? We have a desperate need. We have got to address it, and it can't wait until whenever. It's got to be today. We have got to have shovels on the ground and wood in the air and places for people to live, and I'm excited to work with Mayor Bowser to be a part of that. So thank you.
And I'm going to have to come to you.
As they said, stay tuned for more on this exciting new effort. Now we get to break for lunch. So just through the doors behind you, we will reconvene at 1:15 for our afternoon session. Thank you for joining us this morning.